You're listening to the Cavalier Connection podcast. Here is your host, Jack Lowe.
Welcome to another edition of the Cavalier Connection podcast. I'm your host, Jack Lowe, missing my other two co-hosts today because they're at their real-world jobs. Pretty boring, but I'm joined by Preston WIllett today from the Who's On podcast and the Sabre. How you doing tonight, Preston, or today, Preston?
I'm good, Jack. Who knows what time of day it is right now? We're stuck in crossover season.
Yeah, and we record at night almost any time we record, but there's a handful of times where I'll knock an episode out during the day or whatever, and they're at their other jobs, and it's all in my brain. And I got home like 5-6 hours ago from the basketball game last night. But really quick, before we dive into this episode, I want to remind all of our audience today, that this episode is brought to you by Mincers and Printed Sportswear. Go check out the Mincers closest to you on grounds, whether it's at the corner or at Stonefield. I got this t-shirt from Mincers before the season, and you definitely want to get yours too. Hey, the weather's getting colder out, even though it's warming up again. You can get your hoodies, your quarter zips. A lot of UVA fans like your quarter zips. Be sure to check out Mincers today. With that being said, Preston, let's jump into it. I want to start with basketball really quick. We're going to talk about football, the main portion. That's what people care about right now. A lot of storylines with that. Really quick, as someone who, as a terrible media member fan, I missed the first two games. Last night was my first full game watching. Give me a feel for what you've seen so far and maybe some expectations you have early in the season.
Yeah, I think coming into it, I was under the impression that this is going to take a few games to kind of really click into what Ryan Odom wants. And what I wanted to see was just game over game improvement. And I think you've seen that through the first three games. Each game, it seems like they've improved certain aspects of it. I think the defense was much improved against Hampton last night. They only gave up 19 points in the first half. But the biggest impression so far, I mean, I know he only had 5 points last night, but Tester Ritter is legitimate, and he's going to be a guy that can really impact an ACC play. And it's, Ryan Odom always talked about him being a bully ball kind of guy, but he's got some really good footwork, especially down in the low post. He's got some handles. He can create off the drive. He's been shooting the ball pretty well outside of the Hampton game. So I've really liked what I've seen out of him, but I came into the season and I threw this question out in our season preview podcast, who's going to be the fan favorite for this team? And I came to three guys in my head, and it just so happens to be the three guys coming off the bench right now: Chance Mallory, Jakari White, and Ugano Onyenso. Those guys are just fun basketball players, man. Yeah. Like that bench, and we saw it in full effect against Hampton. Ugano Onyenso with a career high 18 points, hit 2 threes. First 2 threes he's hit in his career. Chance Mallory's making plays all over the court, hitting 4-point plays and getting to the rim. And Jakari White is just a fun basketball player too. You already got the Jakarmi going there in the student section.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
Those guys right there. I thought they'd be really fun basketball players, and I've been proven right so far this season.
100%. And you mentioned Hugo. He's been a lot of fun to watch. He's so athletic and he's so tall. I don't know if you saw his presser after last night, but it was actually really good and really funny. He's awesome with the media, and he mentioned, I'm the best shot blocker in the country, and I really believe that to be true. Just what are your more impressions of him so far?
Yeah, I said from the get-go that this guy is probably going to lead the country in block shots per minute, because he's not out there for a very long period of time, because Grunlow's getting the majority of those center minutes. But when he's out there, he makes an impact, and usually every play that he's involved in is a highlight play, whether it's a alley-oop dunk or hitting a three at the top of the key or hitting a buzzer beater in this situation, or just some of the block shots he gets. And it's really interesting watching the two UVA centers. Like, Grunlow's very good positionally and has good, he goes straight up with his arms. Hugo's just out there swatting stuff. Like, he's doing the full Dikembe Mutombo, swatting you into the second row of the stands. But yeah, he's a fun player, and I got to talk to him a lot over the summer. And he was kind of coy about the shooting, because Odom had mentioned that as something that could happen. And he was like, I don't know, we'll see. And you saw it last night. He hit 2 threes.
And he mentioned at his previous schools that he kind of wasn't even allowed to shoot. Like, if he shot, coaches were yelling at him, and he really loves this coaching staff and how much freedom they're giving him. But if Virginia basketball is successful this year, now what success means, that's another story for another day, whether it's a tournament bid, whether it's making a run in the tournament, whatever. If Virginia basketball is successful this year, blank was the MVP of the team. Who do you think would be the MVP?
I go back and forth on this. My preseason MVP was Malik Thomas, and I still think at the end of the day, they're going to have to get him up to being that, 17, 18 points a game kind of score. Maybe not quite that high, but a more consistent score than he has been so far this season. He's kind of, after his 1 for 10 start, he's kind of, upped his game a little bit the past couple of times. He's had in double-digit scoring, but he seems like too often he's just like kind of a participant in the offense instead of being that focal guy. So I think if they're going to be really successful, he needs to be the guy scoring the basketball, getting 20 points per, 20 points every now and then. And obviously the second guy is going to be DeRitter because I think he's just going to be so crucial for that team. Just the many things that he can do, but Malik Thomas would be my answer.
For sure. And so I'm sure a neutral fan's perspective who's watching ACC basketball loves it. How have you liked the faster pace of play Coach Odom brings to the table compared to the pack line, embrace the pace style that we've had for the last decade? The style of play that I grew up with, how's it compare?
Well, it's interesting because like back during the Tony Bennett era, you usually had time to like take some notes, check some messages in between possessions. Now you don't really have that time, but also it's not that far of a departure because one of the things Odom said after his debut was that they really want to get teams late into shot clocks. They want to, that full court press is not to like speed them up. It's actually to slow them down and to, get 10 seconds off the clock before they start into their half court offense. That's what Tony Bennett was all about, is getting teams late into shot clock and making them make bad decisions and everything. So in that regard, it's the same. And it's funny because Odom was like, get them late in the shot clock and fans will know what to do from there. So I think in that regard, it's similar. They are looking to run more guys have the option to run and go and. But they're also taking a bit of time on the offensive end too. They're not running and gunning per se.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a lot of fun to watch. But now onto the hot topic at the moment. We've got a full season of basketball upcoming. We've got plenty of time to talk about that. But football, only 2 games remaining, which is wild to think about. But the offense has struggled for the most part every game since the Florida State win. In your opinion, what would you say is the biggest reason the offense has halted a bit?
This is something that I keep coming back to on my show and when talking to fans is I don't think there is one big reason. I think there are so many different nuances to this offensive conversation right now that it can't be pinned on one thing. A lot of people want to say Chandler Morris being banged up and not being able to run the football. Sure, I hear that. But actually, if you look at the stats, he has almost the same number of rush attempts that he did in the first 5 games of the season as he had in the last 5 games of the season. So it's kind of similar in how much he's actually running the football. The difference is those aren't as effective. I think the offensive line, obviously had the Brady Wilson injury and you've been banged up there on the offensive line since then with Drake Metcalf and Noah Josie did not have a great game last week against Wake Forest. I don't know what the grades turned out to be, but he was missed a few blocks out there. So some guys have had up and down performances on the offensive line. That's definitely been a part of it. And I think one of the other key things, and I know people have gotten on Des Kitchings in the last couple of weeks, is just the lack of adaptation as the season's progressed. I think that we've seen, some stuff that worked on early in the season, some of these mesh under option routes that the receivers are running to great success hasn't been working lately. Some of the edge runs that Jamari Taylor was having early in the season hasn't been working lately. So it's just about adapting the offense. And I think maybe some of the injuries have held them back from making those adaptations and adjustments as the season's gone on. But also this is my big my big pet peeve right now is like the direct snap to Jamari Taylor works almost every single time.
Yep.
Just run it. I know teams know it's coming now, but guess what? If they can't stop it, keep running it. It's mind-boggling that they don't go to that more in short yardage situations. I think that's where at times Des Kitchings and this UVA offense can get a little cute, where they're overthinking it a little bit, and that's part of being a successful team is you got to figure out how much do you need to change, how much do you just need to keep doing the same stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned being cute, and immediately my mind goes to when they had the ball 3rd and goal or whatever it was, and they went in that weird formation with the receivers spread out, and it just looked terrible. But and also you mentioned Noah Josie, and I just need to get this off my chest really quick. I 100% blame Ball Hawk for that because of how much he was praising Noah Josie a few weeks ago on his podcast. It's all love Ball Hawk. He knows it. But you really want to see that offensive line play better. But talking a little bit more about Des Kitchings this season, do you think there may need to be a change after the season, whether it's moving in a different direction or even having Elliott take over the play calling, or do you think he's still sufficient enough to keep the job?
Look, this is what I come back to here. Everyone's like, oh, he's holding us back. He's doing this and that. And look, it has not been a good couple runs of performance, but raise your hands in the audience. How many people had Virginia at 8-1 heading into last season,
Exactly.
last week? I would almost bet zero did. I had them. I was probably one of the more optimistic people going into the season, and I had Virginia at 8-4. I did not think they would have that by whatever last week was, week 11 or whatever. I did not think that they would be that far advanced at this point. And it's because the offense was so good early in the season. It's because the offense has done enough in some of these games when their defense has really taken some strides now. So, I mean, yeah, look, Des Kitchings has not had a good run of performances. That cannot be understated. But which offensive coordinator in the country is perfect right now? Like, if you get rid of one guy to go to another guy, who's saying you're not going to have the same issues with that? Yeah. I think Penn State saw this. They switched their offensive coordinator up a few years ago, and they got to the college football national championship game. But here we are this season, and they fired their coach James Franklin. So just because you switch the offensive coordinator does not lead to more success. I think it's just a lesson in how you have to adapt. Look, I talked to Des Kitchings before the season. I did a big feature on him because there was a lot of pressure on him coming into the season. And, he was talking a lot about, mismatch hunting and finding those mismatches within the offensive scheme. Well, when you don't have Cam Ross healthy for a game or two, you don't have Xavier Brown out there as a change of pace back to Jamari Taylor, your options get a little more limited. Dakota Twitty is another one who's been out. So it's going to be really challenging for him the next two games. Can he find those adjustments? But no, I don't think there's, when you're 8-1 or 8-2 now, having this kind of season, I don't expect any kind of coaching changes to happen this offseason unless something crazy happens that I can't predict.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us on this podcast, and as you know, it's kind of our niche. We're a fan-based podcast, so we're obviously going to be optimistic at times. I had a 9-3. I think Jay had 9-3. My dad had 8-4. So we were optimistic, but we never expected that first half of the season to explode. We figured a loss was coming at Louisville or Florida State. Now, obviously, Florida State, that's a whole other story for another day. But, it's just the last couple of games, I think, have hindered that a little bit, but you've got to remind people like, hey, Virginia's 8-1 or 8-2 right now. This is the best season they've had in my lifetime. That's for sure. So the Wake Forest game this past Saturday night, the offense looked rough, especially when Morris went down. What surprised you most in that game? And then do you think that can be one of those losses that completely derails the rest of the season and kind of you can't get around?
With the Chandler Morris injury, yeah, absolutely. It could be one of those losses that derails the season. As of right now, Tony Elliott said he was hopeful that, Chandler Morris would be practicing Wednesday, and it kind of seems like he's, kind of gearing up that he might actually play this weekend. So maybe it doesn't derail the season because of that. I think, more so the things that surprised me were in the red zone, that they could not just punch in any of those chances. Like if you go back and look at Cam Robinson blocks that punt on the first possession of the game, you got to score a touchdown there. If they score a touchdown there, and then maybe on the 54-yard Daniel Kalen run, if they score a touchdown there, we're talking about a 9-1 football team right now because Wake Forest offense was having zero success against the UVA defense in this game. And I think, that would have been enough to just get them through that game without Chandler Morris. It's those missed opportunities early in the game. It's not taking the chances when you have them. And then defensively, I was surprised as well as they played. They didn't come away with any sacks, and you could put that on, as Tony Elliott did, that you could put that on. Wake Forest just didn't pass the ball a ton. But I was also surprised they didn't have any of those game-breaking plays that they've had recently of, maybe a sack or an interception or a forced fumble or some kind of turnover that kind of changed the tide. I was surprised that they didn't actually come up with that because what have we seen the last 5 weeks of UVA football is they come away with some crazy defensive play to just sneak across and win this game, and those never came on Saturday.
So, at least from what I know, I think you are a video game guy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So say you're playing the NCAA game and you're in the same position at the end of the game, 4th and 3 from the 5. What's the go-to play? Are we going the mesh concept, maybe a corner route? What's the go-to play if you are Des Kitchens that situation? You're playing the NCAA game. What's the go-to for Preston WIllett?
Gosh, 4th and 3. I probably would do some kind of short, like I think there was like a spacing routes where like guys kind of run up 3 yards and you kind of fire it in there, quick passing. That's what Daniel Kalen was really good at too. But yeah, the mesh routes, I don't know why they haven't been working. I haven't studied that much, but that was probably where I was thinking they would go. But Tony Elliott said they had like a man versus zone type play. I don't love jump balls. Like I love watching them. I don't love calling them because it's so unpredictable, like what's going to happen on those plays. And Daniel Kalen overshooting it by that much was definitely not on my card.
Yeah, really. And people forget, and we reference Ballhawk a lot on the show. He's really smart, but you still could have gotten the first down. You didn't have to go to the end zone. And exactly that spacing route where you find a quick little hitch or maybe a quick speed out, like you could have gotten a first down. But in the heat of the moment, you're kind of like the clock's running low, and I get it to a point, and Kalen hasn't had much time in the spotlight. So, I mean, it is what it is. But you mentioned earlier, Coach Elliott said yesterday morning, Chandler, really depending on if he's going to practice or not today. If Virginia does have to go to Kalen against Duke, how big of an impact will that have, and does that hinder Virginia's chances?
Yeah, I'm actually working on an article right now for the Sabre.com of like what's the differences between when Chandler's in there versus Kalen's in there, and what can the offense be successful in those ways. And so with Kalen, I think it comes back to not limiting the offense, but more so focusing the offense. Give him some quick passes. If you saw like the 3 big pass plays that Daniel Kalen had in this game were two to Trell Harris and 1 to Cam Courtney. They were short passes where the receiver really had the bulk of the work of turning upfield. Well, that's great because Trell Harris, Cam Courtney, Cam Ross, they can make big plays. If you get them like 5 yards and get them into some space, they can make guys miss and turn it up. So I think they need a little bit more of just like let the receivers do the hard work. Let Daniel Kalen do the easy work of delivering it to them quickly. So like maybe a 1-read progression, and then if that's not open, go to the check down. I mean, Jamari Taylor had like 8 catches in this game. So like the check down's there. Sage Ennis can also be a check down receiver that they've found a couple times in this game. So simplify in that way. And then I said this on my podcast. I put it this way. I had Mike Barber from Seville right now on, and I said, whether it's Chandler Morris, Daniel Kalen, or Mike Barber playing quarterback, you've got to run the football and you've got to do it successfully. Like it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Jamari Taylor's got to be used effectively. Harrison Whaley off the bench. I know Noah Vaughn's not going to play this week either. So you got to use those guys, and you got to pick up yards on 1st and 2nd down because that's where this offense is getting out of rhythm. They're not picking up enough yards on 1st and 2nd down. So that's what the successful route for Daniel Kalen will be. I did talk to a writer over covering Duke, and he said that Duke's defense, they've struggled this year, but one of the things they've really struggled with is when an offense is just in rhythm on those short passing routes. So that's something that I think they could really pick apart Duke with whoever's at quarterback.
Yeah, so looking ahead to Duke, they're a tough team. They've been a bit inconsistent. I've been watching them myself. They've had some outstanding games, and then they lose to UConn in football. But again, I guess UConn's having an okay year. What will it take to take down Duke in a road game on Saturday?
Yeah, I think offensively, it's kind of what I was just saying. Short passes and just kind of getting that offense into a rhythm and having enough of a run game to kind of keep the defense honest. One thing that Duke does have is a really good defensive line. Behind that, you've got some options, but the defensive line, they have a guy in Vincent Anthony Jr. He hasn't had a sack in a couple of weeks, but he's a really effective pass rusher, one of the best in the ACC. Wesley Williams is another guy on the inside that's really good for them. So they have some guys on the defensive line, but if you can establish the run and then get that quick passing game going, I mean, like honestly, like we talk about the offensive issues. If UVA's offense can just get in a rhythm and finish off some of these drives in the red zone, I think they have enough there because you don't need a ton right now with how this defense is playing. Now, on the flip side, this Duke offense is pretty legit. Darian Mensah at quarterback,
Mhm.
one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC this year, and they have a lot of weapons. They have a freshman running back in Nate Shepard, who's really good. They've got a couple of different receivers that can really affect you. But I think honestly, if they can, get some pressure on him, he has been sacked 18 times this season. He's not the most mobile quarterback, so he can be a sitting duck back there at times. So if they can get some pressure on him, they're going to have plenty of opportunities to do it with as much as Duke passes. But Duke gets into a problem right now when they get into the red zone and their offense kind of breaks down in the red zone and they come away with the field goal instead of 7. Sounds like a John Rodzinski bend but don't break kind of defensive day for Virginia.
Yeah, for sure. So moving ahead, and we still have a couple days. Our podcast will talk more about Duke. So I don't know as much from your perspective. You're more on like the media side than we're still learning more on getting on the media side. But at the end of the day, we're a fan-based podcast, and so we have fan opinions. And in our opinions, the Virginia Tech game is the most important on the schedule. Period. And many fans are very skeptical about it because of the series history. Number one, what is that in your opinion? How important is that game? And do you think Coach Elliott will have the Hoos ready to go for it?
Well, it's coming off a bye week. So if there's one stat that we know
Yep.
about Tony Elliott,
Yeah.
he's undefeated after a bye week. That was the huge news when the schedule came back all the way back then. That everyone was like,
Yeah.
oh, good, it's after a bye week. That actually might help us. Look at this. We talked about earlier, no one expected Virginia to be in this position to be competing for an ACC championship. Maybe the guys in that building did, because I know Tony Elliott talked about it a lot, that was their goal. They wanted to get to an ACC title game. I think at the end of the day, Virginia fans could probably rationalize if they lose this game at Duke, but they beat Virginia Tech. I think most people would come away thinking this was a great season.
Yeah.
Even if you come short and don't get to Charlotte. If you flip those, they beat Duke and they lose to Virginia Tech in the last week of the season, I think Virginia fans will have a tough time calling this a successful season. That's how much that game kind of looms over large, especially when Virginia Tech has an interim head coach right now. And, you're kind of getting Virginia Tech at a weaker point for their program. You really want to take advantage of that and get that win, get the monkey off the back. I will point out too, like, over half the roster hasn't played a game against Virginia Tech. They don't really have an opinion on this rivalry at this point. They don't have the monkey on their back per se. It's really Tony Elliott and the coaching staff that are going to go in there with that.
Yeah, and it's hilarious that you mentioned between the Duke Virginia. That's exactly what we were talking about in our Wake recap podcast. Like, would you sacrifice the Duke game, or would you sacrifice even going to Charlotte for a Virginia Tech win? And for the three of us, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a yes. But there's also other people who have more goals, bigger goals to go to the ACC championship. But what I told people is, it's realistic to get both. Like, there's only 2 games left on the schedule.
Absolutely.
And like it's really possible. It's only Duke and Virginia Tech. But kind of transitioning to that Charlotte run, which is, I don't even want to look at the ACC tiebreakers trying to figure out how it's going to work out. It's just unbelievable. But what do you think Virginia needs to do to get to Charlotte, and maybe what position group needs to step up biggest in these final 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to find just enough offense to kind of make it through. At the end of the day, like, if they score 30 plus points a game, like, that's great, but just enough offense with the way this defense is playing right now.
Yep.
That's what they got to do. So I think the group that I'd honestly be looking at is the offensive line. They were so great, and I wrote so many stories about them early in the season, sung their praise on the podcast the first 5-6 weeks. But they've really regressed the last few weeks, and they've let the quarterbacks get sacked a couple more times. I mean, Daniel Kalen lost those 2 fumbles against Wake Forest. Chandler Morris was sacked 6 times against UNC. They were better against Cal, but yeah, the offensive line is really taking a step back. And so if they can just get healthy and kind of find that cohesion that they had early in the season again, I think that is the group that is really going to define how these next couple of weeks go. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback if the offensive line is not doing their job protecting and opening up running lanes for Jamari Taylor.
Yeah, and so say Virginia does get to Charlotte. When you look around the ACC, I mean, some people will call it a down year, some people will call it a loaded conference. But do you think Virginia is capable of beating any team that would meet them in Charlotte?
Yeah, I think Absolutely. Like they have a chance. They have a puncher's chance in any of those games. I think Georgia Tech's probably the toughest team out there that they would have to
I
face,
agree.
but I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be, considering that game. Like early in the season, first off, I've really enjoyed this ACC football season. I know it's
Yeah,
chaotic and
I
everything,
have
and
too.
people are
100%.
losing, but
Hmm.
like there's some good teams out there. They're not bad teams just beating each other up. They're good football teams out there. But the ACC is just, I think, a little bit deeper than they have been in the past. And they, outside of Boston College, we can leave them out to dry
Yeah,
in every sport right now, it feels like.
yeah, yeah.
But I've really enjoyed this season. But the team early in the season that I was like, I don't know if Virginia could really give them a game is Miami. But Miami's fallen off now. It doesn't even look like they're going to have a realistic chance at making the ACC title game, even though that the college football playoff rankings have the number one. They do have a great resume, so I understand that. And they could be the only ACC team that has a chance in that large bid. But I think that they have a chance. Georgia Tech would be the toughest. If they play SMU, I think they definitely have a chance. Pitt, I think, is another option there. So I would give them a shot against any of those teams.
Yeah, and you talked about the ACC. I agree. I think it's been a lot of fun to watch. And it's just funny because I'll see like tweets and stuff. People will replace the logos from the ACC with SEC logos, saying and like portraying it like if this is the SEC, they'd be saying, "Oh my goodness, this is the toughest conference," but it's not. It's the ACC. And so with the College Football Playoff Committee, they just came out yesterday as well, and last week. They've kind of came out in a sense that the ACC isn't very good and they will probably only get one team in the playoffs. Do you agree with that, or do you think there should be a little bit more respect?
I think there should be more respect. I think as soon as they released their rankings, their first rankings last week, it was pretty clear that, all right, yeah, they only view the ACC as a one bid league this year. And it's unfortunate, but that's kind of where it is. It's funny that they had Miami in like the little fake bracket that they do because they are the first ACC team when they have one of the least amount of shots of getting to Charlotte and actually earning that spot. But they could Miami or Georgia Tech would be the two that I think could make a realistic case by the end of the season to be an at-large team. If Georgia Tech goes and beats Georgia, I think that would be massive for them. And then if someone beat Georgia Tech in the ACC title game after that, that would be the way that I see they could get two teams in there. If Miami finishes out well and some other teams from other conferences drop down. But yeah, it's probably a one bid league this year. People are talking about the doomsday scenario where maybe Duke wins the conference and you're like maybe JMU and someone from these other conferences, American, jump them. I don't see a scenario where they actually leave the ACC out entirely.
Yeah, I've seen that all over the place. I really hope that doesn't happen. That would be terrible. But say Virginia does get to Charlotte and they win the ACC championship, putting them in the playoffs, assuming that they wouldn't, get screwed over. Do you think they're capable of competing in the playoffs, or is that just a whole nother league?
That'd be tough. Where I commit to anything, that would be a really tough run. I mean, throwing out there against teams like Ole Miss or Georgia or Oregon. I think they would be able to make a competitive game out of it, depending on what their health situation looks like by that point. But yeah, I think just getting there is all a fan could really hope for this year.
Yep, I agree. I got a couple more for you with the Duke game coming up Saturday. Do you have I'm going to put you on the spot. You have a final score prediction for the Duke game, and you don't have to give me one if you don't have one.
Luckily, I just did this on my other podcast that's coming out on Thursday, so I am prepared. We feel good. It's going to be a close game. I think we all know that at this point in Virginia fandom this year, the cardiac calves and whatnot. I'm going 34-31 Virginia over Duke. I think this Duke defense has a lot of holes in it. So I think points will be scored because Duke's going to score points too. But I think I'm going to go ahead on a ledge and say Chandler Morris plays in this game and Virginia wins 34-31.
Ooh, man, very exciting stuff. So with that being said, final record prediction and then a part B to the question, will they get to Charlotte and will they win in Charlotte?
Oof, that is really putting me on the spot. If I got them beat, winning at Duke. I think I got them beating Tech. So 10-2 for the season. That'd be my prediction at this point, which is crazy to see a Virginia get a 10-win season if they can get to that point. And Charlotte, gosh, if it's Georgia Tech, I would pick the Yellow Jackets in that one. If it's someone else, I'd probably go UVA. But Georgia Tech's the one team right now that I'm just not sure. But I think it's going to be a close game regardless. Like, it's going to be a good game if they get to Charlotte. I'm hoping they do, because I think that'd be a fun day. Of you got UVA against Dayton that afternoon, and then you got ACC title game that night. Like, I don't think I've had a confluence of events like that with UVA athletics in my career covering them.
Ever. Yeah. And I already have plans to be in Charlotte, whether it's just for because I have some friends that live down there. So I'm going to be in that basketball game. I'm going to be at the conference championship regardless. So I'm just, hoping let's make it a little more fun and add a little more stress into the trip. But with that being said, I really appreciate your time with me today, Preston. Where can the people find your stuff? Who's on podcast and over at the Sabre?
Yeah, Who's on podcast? We go twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week if people really want to talk about UVA that week. We've had some great guests lately: Wes Durham from ESPN, Eric McLean from the ACC Huddle Show, and so on and so on. We're going to talk about football this week mainly because it's a big game this week. So we got the Who's on podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you find your podcast, you can find the Who's on podcast there. And then at thesabre.com, we got everything going up this week ahead of the game. I'll have a story I think I mentioned earlier about the quarterbacks and how the offense looks. That's going to be going, I think, on Thursday. So, lot going on. And then we'll be down there in Durham on Saturday.
Appreciate your time, Preston. You're the best. And go Hoos, all right?
Appreciate it, Jack. Thanks.
That's going to wrap up this episode of the Cavalier Connection podcast. Appreciate all of you for tuning in. Thanks a lot to Preston WIllett from the Sabre and the Who's On podcast for taking the time out of his busy day to join me today, talking Who's football and Who's hoops, and a very big game against Duke Saturday. So we might have another episode previewing Duke later this week. Be on the lookout for that. And as always, go check out thecavalierconnection.com for all of your articles and all the links and everything you would need. And also, I forgot to mention, we are now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Now, on Spotify, it's a bit confusing. We have a couple different profiles on there. It's the one that says The Cavalier Connection. That's the one. There's some old ones on there, but The Cavalier Connection on Spotify. And then on Apple Podcasts, we are on Apple Podcasts now, so you can go take a look at that. That's going to wrap us up tonight or today. Go Hoos.